Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into something a little unusual. Your sandals. You're walking across a dew-drenched meadow in the early morning, trailing the bleating of sheep and the scent of damp grass. Your hands are calloused. Your tunic smells faintly of yesterday's goat, and somewhere in the distance, there's a golden god of music and archery, sulking about having to shovel manure. That's right. Tonight you're heading back to the ancient Greek world, not for epic battles or heroic quests, but to witness something much sleepier. The time when Apollo, yes, that Apollo, the gleaming sun god, with cheekbones so sharp they could cut bronze, got fired from a shepherd job. Why? Well, the gods are nothing if not petty, and Apollo, in all his harp-strumming glory, made the wrong joke at the wrong time, or as some versions suggest, shot an arrow into the wrong cyclopes. Either way, Zeus had thoughts about appropriate behavior, and divine timeout involved an unpaid sabbatical on Earth. For one mortal year, Apollo would trade radiant temples for wooden fences, and celestial odes for counting sheep. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake by the end of this epic sheep-shuffling saga, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're not quite Apollo, but close enough for storytelling purposes. Imagine being banished from Olympus, your golden hair slightly wind-blown, your laurel wreath wilted from the sudden change in altitude. You've gone from celestial duties, like hauling the sun across the sky, and composing lullabies for planets, to being handed a crooked shepherd's crook, and pointed toward a field full of sheep with suspiciously judgmental eyes. Why is Apollo being punished? Historians still argue whether it was his reckless slaying of the Cyclopes, who forged Zeus's lightning bolts, or his general attitude problem. Either way, Zeus was not having it, and rather than just grounding Apollo in his room, or taking away his golden iPod of divine tunes, he sentenced him to manual labor. For mortals, this might look like community service. For a god, it means becoming a very shiny, very melodramatic shepherd. You're dropped in the region of Thessaly, famous for its grassy meadows, sleepy villages, and a notable lack of patience for immortal flair. The humans here are more concerned with wool prices and whether or not the river will flood again. They do not care that you once dated a muse. You make your entrance barefoot sun-dappled, trailing a faint scent of ambrosia and the sound of invisible lyres. The townspeople are instantly suspicious. No one who glows that subtly should be asking for farm work. Still, King Admetus needs help. He's young, ruling a modest kingdom with a modest flock, and a slightly immodest ego. When this unusually handsome stranger volunteers to manage his herds, Admetus raises an eyebrow, shrugs, and figures, well, worst case, he just stands there looking divine. Apollo, of course, doesn't explain who he is. That would ruin the fun. Also, gods have this thing about learning humility, or pretending to anyway. Your first day is humbling. You've never actually walked in mud before. Not like this. Not without the power to hover slightly above it, or summon a warm breeze to dry your sandals. And sheep are loud. They chew constantly, and somehow smell like mildew and old socks, even when freshly washed. You try to introduce a little order, naming the animals after stars and constellations. But they ignore you. The goats in particular seem to be mocking your accent, a curious fact. For you ancient Greek shepherds didn't just wander the hills aimlessly. They used musical cues, specific whistles, even primitive counting stones to manage their flocks. You try all of these, and then some. Harp solos, lyrical monologues, one ill-advised interpretive dance. None of it works. One ram, who you've mentally named Ares Jr., headbutts you into a puddle. A passing mortal woman, seeing the god of light splattered in mud, chuckles and offers you a turnip. You accept it with as much dignity as possible. Nights in Thessaly are colder than expected. You miss Olympus, not the parties, or the nectar so much as the warmth. Here your blanket is a coarse wool cloak that smells like wet moss and regret. You curl up beside a pile of sleepy goats, wondering how long a mortal year really is. You hum lullabies to yourself. The goats snore. Still, something about this is oddly calming. You don't have to duel anyone. No curses, no love triangles with tragic endings. No grand destinies, just a sky full of stars, and a meadow full of grass, and a bunch of livestock you're gradually growing fond of. One of the lambs starts following you around. You name her Muse. The irony isn't lost on you. As days pass, you begin to adjust. You tie your hair back with twine. You learn how to sharpen a stick for protection. You even figure out how to whistle using a blade of grass. The locals are amused by your enthusiasm and slightly suspicious of your unusually poetic morning greetings. Still, no one complains when their sheep start producing cleaner wool and their children fall asleep faster, listening to your nighttime flute. And back on Olympus, no one notices you're gone. Except maybe Artemis, your twin sister, who once gave you that exact same, "You're going to regret this" look before you threw a sunbeam at the Cyclopes. You mentally apologize. Sort of. You're still Apollo, of course. But down here your hands are dirty, your sandals are worn, and you're starting to understand strange mortality may be annoying, but it's also kind of beautiful, even if it does smell faintly of manure. The moment you arrive in King Admetus's modest court, it becomes clear this isn't your usual Olympus-style onboarding experience. There's no chorus of nymphs, no ambrosia buffet, and definitely no welcome harp fanfare. Just a scribbled job listing pinned to a wooden post, and a very tired steward who keeps blinking at your glowing skin, like he's trying to pretend it isn't happening. Admetus himself is lounging on what might generously be called a throne, really more of a slightly nicer chair. He looks you over, once raises an eyebrow at your clean fingernails and celestial posture, and mutters, "Can you handle sheep?" You say yes, which is technically not a lie. You just forget to mention that your last leadership experience involved directing the 9 Muses in a musical about the birth of the cosmos. A flock of sheep seems manageable. Admetus hires you on the spot, not because he believes you, but because his regular herdsman has a recurring foot fungus, and no one else applied. Your name. You offer Phoebus. It's one of your middle names anyway. Phoebus Apollo, god of light and reason, feels rustic enough for the situation. He shrugs. Fine, Phoebus. You'll start tomorrow. Sunrise. You don't ask what time sunrise is. You are sunrise. But sure, that night, you sleep in a small, drafty room above the goat pens. There's a cot, a single itchy blanket, and a straw pillow that smells like onions. You try to summon a warming breeze with a flick of your fingers, but realize with a mild pang of panic that the divine Wi-Fi is disabled. Olympus has officially cut you off, No powers, no perks, mortal rules only. The next morning, you show up wearing your best approximation of shepherd fashion: a belted tunic, a pair of borrowed sandals, and a borrowed crook that's slightly too short and very splintery. You smile confidently. 3 sheep immediately escape. You run after them. It's less majestic chariot pursuit, more frantic flailing with lots of yelling. The sheep are faster than they look. One of them makes eye contact with you in a way that suggests she knows exactly who you are, and is deeply unimpressed. Eventually, you corral the escapees with the help of an elderly shepherd named Myron, who spends most of the day chewing herbs and muttering city boys. Always with the soft hands. You thank him politely. He squints at you. You're one of those theater types, aren't you? You nod. It's easier than explaining cosmic balance and sun trajectories. Still by midday, you've figured out the basics. Sheep need water. Sheep like routine. Sheep hate lyre music. This last fact becomes tragically apparent when you attempt a midday concert to soothe the flock and cause a minor stampede. Admetus hears about it. Instead of firing you, he looks vaguely entertained. "You're weird," he says, "but the wool's cleaner already. You staying?" You nod. Honestly, what else are you going to do? And so your new life begins part-time shepherd, part-time court curiosity. Admetus invites you to dinner occasionally, mostly so you can explain why the sheep seem to hum when you walk by. You give vague answers. Positive energy, you say, or proper protein rotation. He buys it. He's too busy being adored by his citizens to ask many questions. You're intrigued by him. Admetus is handsome, charming, and just naive enough to believe in things like destiny and dream omens. He reminds you of a younger version of yourself, minus the solar flares. Over time, a quiet friendship grows between you. He asks for advice. You give him veiled wisdom wrapped in sheep metaphors. He doesn't always get it, but he nods thoughtfully, which is more than most mortals do. A curious fact from the history books in ancient Thessaly kings, like Admetus, were sometimes expected to perform religious rites to ensure the health of their herds and crops. Some scholars even argue whether Admetus's reign marked an early fusion of king as priest traditions in pre-classical Greece. You watch him recite prayers with a sincerity that's almost endearing, and you resist the urge to correct his pronunciation, because here's the thing, you're starting to like it. The rhythm of it all. The sun rising, the sheep bleating, the people bustling. There's comfort in the mundane. No one is asking you to duel a serpent. No tragic lovers are turning into laurel trees on your watch. It's quiet, peaceful, even if the goats do bite sometimes. But that doesn't mean it's not weird. People are beginning to notice things, like how you never seem to age, or how wolves keep showing up near the pasture and just sitting, not attacking, just watching, like they're waiting for instructions. You name one of them Lycos and toss him leftover crusts from dinner. He winks at you. Definitely not normal, and let's not forget the harp. You've taken to playing it in the evenings again, seated under an olive tree while the sun dips below the horizon. The locals gather quietly nearby. You never speak during these sessions, but the music speaks for you. Lyrical and longing notes threading through the breeze like silk ribbons. Myron still doesn't like you, though. "Too pretty," he says, spitting into the dirt. Makes the sheep nervous. One afternoon, Admetus watches you conducting the flock with an overly choreographed whistle-lilt shuffle combo and shakes his head. You sure you were born around here? You smile. Very far south, like Crete. Farther. He nods. Ah, one of those island types. You leave it at that. What you don't tell him is that you're starting to dream like a mortal. You feel cold. You stub your toe. You laugh at sheep jokes. You wake up with straw in your hair and don't immediately levitate. Mortality. It turns out is a kind of slow enchantment, scratchy, persistent, and oddly satisfying. But you're also beginning to sense that this peaceful chapter is temporary. You know Zeus. Eventually, he'll remember where he left you. And when he does, there will be consequences. Because gods don't just hang out with mortals, not without strings attached. Still for now, you shepherd. You nap in the grass. You hum lullabies to lambs. You get good at pretending not to be Apollo. Your third week on the job begins with a thud, a very literal one as you trip over a goat. Again, this one's name is probably Ptolemy, or Snack, or something equally ridiculous, and he has a habit of napping in high-traffic areas. You mutter something halfway divine under your breath, and catch yourself just before saying a word that would have turned Ptolemy into a shrub. Mortality, after all, comes with rules, and one of those rules is no spontaneous shrubbery. You dust off your tunic and take a long look at the pasture. It's springtime in Thessaly. The fields roll out in gentle folds of green and gold. Bees bumble lazily past. The sheep are mercifully grazing and not staging another rebellion. It's actually nice. Well, except for the cow patties. You didn't know they could be so stealthy. One wrong step, and there you are, sun god, musical genius, patron of poetry, scraping dung off your borrowed sandals with a stick. You glance around to make sure no one's watching, then sigh. Your pride, much like your sandals, has taken a hit. There's a Greek word for this kind of ridiculous humility, katabasis, the act of descending. Heroes do it all the time, but they usually descend into underworlds, not sheep paddocks. Still, you persevere. You build a schedule because of course you do. The sheep respond well to consistency. You create a roster of grazing zones. You hum to the lambs in a 5/4 time signature to lull them into napping. You even experiment with color-coded collars for tracking wool quality. Honestly, you're kind of crushing it. The other shepherds, not so much. They've taken to calling you fancy boy. Myron especially. He spits every time you tune your lyre. One evening, while you're arranging sheep by aesthetic harmony, you've almost got a gradient going from ivory to stormy gray. Myron stumps over and grunts. You trying to win a beauty contest or raise livestock. You smile politely. Why not both? He stares at you for a full 10 seconds. You're not from around here. Still true. Another shepherd, a younger one named Diodoros, pulls you aside later. You talk like the philosophers in town. Heard one once. Real confusing. You shrug. Maybe I just like words. He nods solemnly as if this is a great tragedy. That'll make the sheep hate you, and yet the sheep don't hate you. They follow you. When you whistle, they pause. When you play your lyre, they sigh. And when you lie in the grass, they form a semicircle around you, like you're hosting some kind of woolly symposium, which is probably why the villagers start whispering. At first, it's little things. That Phoebus, he's odd, but polite. He hasn't aged a day since he got here. He plays music that makes my baby sleep like a rock. But then come the bigger ones. I saw him touch a sick lamb, and it stood up like nothing happened. The wolves don't go near him. One bowed. You pretend not to hear. You focus on your tasks, herding, feeding, composing terrible sheep-themed poetry. O fleece, thou cloud upon the field. Yeah, no, not your best, but one morning you find a small crowd gathered at the edge of the pasture. They're staring, not at you this time, but at the wolves. There are 5 of them now, lounging at a respectful distance, as if attending some sort of celestial TED Talk. One is gnawing on a wild boar skull. Another is definitely wearing a garland of wildflowers, courtesy of one of the local girls, no doubt. The wolves do not menace. They observe. You decide it's time to have a conversation. You approach Lycos, the leader, his fur dark as obsidian, his eyes far too intelligent for a normal canine. He blinks slowly as you kneel before him. I didn't call you, you say under your breath. You're not supposed to be here. He yawns. You're going to give me away. He licks his paw completely unconcerned. This, by the way, is not the first time Apollo has been associated with wolves. In fact, one of your epithets, Apollo Lycaos, means of the wolves. Historians still argue whether this title refers to a protective role, a symbolic association with the sun's cycle, or some now lost Thessalian cult, where you were worshipped with actual howling. You don't remember the details. Olympus had poor record-keeping. That evening you tried to keep your distance from the court, but Admetus finds you anyway. You know he says I've never seen wolves behave like that. My men say they don't touch the sheep anymore. You offer a non-committal hum. He smiles faintly. Some say you're a god in disguise. You blink, caught between honesty and sheep-induced loyalty. Would that make you nervous? He shrugs. Only if you start demanding temples. You laugh. So does he. You think not for the first time that you'll miss this mortal when it's time to go. But there's still time. Still days filled with clover and distant flute music, and the occasional hoof to the shin. Still the occasional cow patty, too. Divinity doesn't protect you from bad aim, and so you go on shepherding. You start holding informal lectures for the wolves. You explain lunar cycles using turnips. You play them melodies composed in minor modes and chart their reactions. You swear one of them cries during a ballad or yawns. It's hard to tell. The villagers get used to it somehow. You're the weird, sun-colored guy with the sheep discipline of a military general and a fan club of semi-domesticated predators. Thessaly has seen weirder. Probably. At night, you lie in the fields and look up at the stars. You trace constellations and murmur old myths to the sheep, who honestly make a pretty decent audience, and for now the pasture is quiet. The gods are silent, and your days pass one small, oddly meaningful task at a time. You may be on divine probation, but you've never felt more grounded. You know it's going to be one of those days when the flock refuses to move. Not just dawdling, not just sluggish. They've straight up formed a sheep sit-in. 30 stubborn balls of wool have encircled a bush of questionable berries and are bleating in open rebellion. You stare at them, crook and hand lyre slung over your back, and sigh. Somewhere in the distant hills, a wolf howls not in menace, more like it's laughing. You try reason. Come on, friends. New pasture, fresh clover, slightly fewer thorns, silence. You try music. A lilting tune in 6/8, gently persuasive, woven with just the faintest hint of celestial influence. One sheep nods off. The rest remain unimpressed. That's when Pan shows up. You hear him before you see him, the fluttery wheeze of panpipes, and the unmistakable giggle snort of someone deeply amused by their own entrance. You turn, and there he is, short, hairy legs, like a goat smile, like someone who knows too many jokes involving cheese. Phoebus, he calls arms wide, skipping a bit as he approaches. You've really lowered your standards. Look at you, all muddy and mortal. You narrow your eyes. Pan. He grins. I smelled olive oil and overconfidence and thought must be Apollo. You're too tired to argue. What do you want? Oh, nothing. He plops down on a boulder, chewing a twig. Just passing through. Heard there was a celestial has been running a livestock daycare. You ignore him and nudge the nearest sheep, who responds by sneezing directly onto your shin. Pan watches this with delight. You've got a gift. I've got a headache. Pan wiggles his eyebrows. Wanna have a musical duel for old time's sake? You win, I'll help with the flock. I win, you have to admit that panpipes are better than the lyre. You glance at the sheep, then at Pan, then back at the sheep, now starting to nibble on each other's ears. Fine. So there under the Thessalian sky, with one wolf watching and several goats snoring nearby, you and Pan hold a contest of sound. He goes first. Panpipes chirpy nasal, vaguely reminiscent of a caffeinated bird trying to whistle opera. The sheep seem confused but intrigued. One begins to sway. You follow with your lyre smooth, low tones, harmonics that shimmer like sunbeams on water. The sheep perk up. One even bows. Pan looks mildly offended. Oh, come on, he grumbles. You can't use God voice modulation. That's cheating. You arch a brow. Mortal rules. He pouts, then hurls a pine cone at you. It misses. Barely. Fun fact. Contests like these were common in Greek mythology. Remember Marsyas the satyr, who dared challenge you? Historians still argue whether that myth is a metaphor for cultural dominance. Apollo representing ordered civilization versus wild rural music. Others say it's just about artistic ego and very poor decision-making. This time, though, you let it go. No flaying, no vengeance, just a slightly bruised ego and a pine cone lodged in a shrub. Pan eventually relents and starts helping out. His idea of helping is to lead the sheep in rhythmic clapping exercises using sticks and off-key humming, but the animals seem entertained, so you let it be. By sunset, the flock is herded, the wolves have wandered off, and Pan is braiding flowers into your hair, while telling you about a mushroom that allegedly lets you dream someone else's dreams. You file that away, under things not to try near sheep, later over a campfire made of dry twigs, and a suspiciously flammable herb pan. Found you share silence. It's not unpleasant. The sky is streaked with indigo and rose. Crickets chirp like sleepy tambourines. Pan finally says, "So, how long are you doing this?" You shrug, until Zeus remembers I exist. He always did have a short memory for anything not involving himself. Or lightning. You both chuckle. Pan studies you for a moment, eyes more serious now. You know, some of us prefer the mortal stuff. Dirt under the nails. Real food. Warm goats. You glance at him. I thought you lived for chaos. I do, he says, grinning. But even chaos needs something to come home to. You don't respond. Because deep down you get it. More than you'd like to admit. Eventually, Pan dozes off mid-sentence. Something about training ducks to play tambourines. And you're left alone with your flock, your lyre, and the quiet creak of wind through olive trees. You wonder how Olympus is faring without you. Probably fine. The sun rises automatically when you're on Earth, thanks to some obscure override protocol. You tried to explain it to Myron once. He thought you were describing a really intense bread recipe, and so you stretch out on your woven mat of reeds and listen to the sheep snuffle in their sleep. One bleats softly in its dreams. You hum a calming chord. In that moment, surrounded by snoozing goats, a pine cone crown, and the lingering scent of wild thyme. You realize something peculiar. You're not entirely sure you want to go back. The next week begins with Artemis shooting arrows at your sheep. To be clear, she isn't trying to hit them. She's aiming at targets, crude wooden discs, painted with bullseyes, and propped precariously on barrels of turnips. But your sheep don't know that. They just know there's a gleaming goddess in silver, stomping through their grazing field, loosing arrows with the precision of a surgical strike, and the attitude of someone who hasn't had a nap in 3 centuries. Could you not, you say, from your perch atop a boulder, where you've been braiding fresh dandelions into a crown, for Muse the lamb? Some of us are trying to keep livestock from stampeding into rivers today. Artemis doesn't look up. I needed flat ground. You know how rare that is in Thessaly. Use the temple courtyard. Too many tourists. Try a mountain. Too many gods. One arrow zips past your left ear and lodges itself in a tree behind you. You eye her. That one felt pointed. She smirks. What afraid of a little competition. You raise an eyebrow. Last time we competed, I made the sun cry. She shrugs. Last time we competed, you tripped over your own laurel wreath. Touché. Artemis, for all her sharpness, is one of the few Olympians you tolerate for more than 10 minutes at a time. She gets it. The pressure, the pride, the ridiculous expectations that come with divinity. She's spent just as much time avoiding her so-called duties as you have performing yours with excessive flair. Still, her timing isn't ideal. The sheep are frazzled. One has taken up permanent residence behind a bush. Another keeps trying to climb your leg. You lead Artemis away from the pasture and into the olive grove where the goats can't judge you. She follows, twirling an arrow between her fingers like a baton. So she says after a beat, "How's the punishment going?" "Oh, you say, brushing a pine needle off your shoulder. Learning humility. Shoveling things I won't name. Making emotional eye contact with goats." She snorts. "Heard you've got wolves quoting your poetry. Only stanza 1. They're picky." She looks around the grove, squinting at the quiet. "You like it here. You don't answer right away." Because she's right, and saying it aloud makes it feel permanent. Like you've settled into the rhythm of this life in ways that can't be reversed. Eventually you say, "I like the quiet." She tilts her head. "Since when do you like quiet?" "Since no one here asks me for prophecies' songs, or to curse their enemies' crops." Artemis tosses a stone into a nearby stream. It skips once, twice, then plunks. "Zeus is watching, you know," she says quietly. You blink. Of course he is. He always is. Like an overzealous landlord, he says if you overstep. She trails off as if unsure how to finish the sentence. "Just be careful." You sigh. "I'm not trying to overstep. I'm just over-shepherding." She gives you a sideways glance. Over-shepherding. It's a term I coined. It means making goats learn harmony and assigning emotional archetypes to lambs. She chuckles and tosses another stone. There's a silence, then soft and full of cicadas. Eventually she says, "You know, this can't last, right?" You nod. "I know, but you don't want to know." "Not yet." Because there's something grounding about the mundane, about feeding animals, watching storms roll in, and not having to burn with celestial intensity all the time. You walk back together. The sheep are less terrified now. Muse even tries to nuzzle Artemis, who yelps and mutters something about affection being overrated. You smile and return to the field. The shepherds wave. Diodoros offers you a boiled egg. Myron grumbles something about women with weapons and glares at the sky. The day passes. You organize the sheep into something resembling an a cappella group. They are terrible. You love them anyway. Later by the campfire, You tell a story to the wolves about how the gods once held a foot race across the ocean's surface, and Poseidon lost because he tripped on a wave. Lycos seems unimpressed. The others fall asleep mid-howl. Fun, historical tidbit. Some early Greek rituals involved dramana, ritual reenactments meant to mirror the actions of gods and heroes. Some scholars believe shepherds were occasionally included in these rites to represent the pastoral foundation of early society. You suspect you're single-handedly reviving that tradition. That night, you dream of Artemis standing at the edge of the field, bow-lowered gaze unreadable. You wake with dew on your lashes and a goat chewing your sleeve. Mortality is exhausting, but strangely, it's starting to feel like home. You realize things are getting out of hand when one of your wolves starts herding the sheep for you. You're halfway through a new experimental grazing pattern, circular spiral formation, version 3.1, when you notice Lycos trotting alongside the outer edge, issuing little growls and nudges like a seasoned shepherd. The sheep respond instantly obediently, forming a near-perfect circle, each one positioned like a fluffy bead on the world's slowest necklace. You stop mid-whistle and lower your crook. Lycos, you say slowly, "Are you unionizing?" The wolf flicks an ear and sits down smugly. The other shepherds begin noticing. Diodoros swears softly under his breath and mutters something about omens. Myron predictably spits in the dust and says, "That's not a sheepdog. That's an abomination." You offer a diplomatic smile. Think of it as evolutionary innovation. Myron doesn't respond, but he does cross himself 3 times and start humming a protection hymn. In D minor, the sheep, for their part, seem thrilled. They've developed an oddly close relationship with the wolves, who now act less like predators and more like overbearing life coaches. One particularly fluffy ewe named Daphne even begins nuzzling one of the smaller wolves during nap time. It's adorable and deeply suspicious. Meanwhile, you're growing more efficient than ever. With the wolves managing the bulk of the herding, you're free to pursue advanced pastoral strategies. You build a shaded watering station, complete with terracotta bowls, arranged by hydration preference. You introduce a twice-daily rotation of grass varieties designed for optimal digestion and maximum fluffiness. You also implement mandatory music hours light lyre melodies at dusk, followed by bedtime panpipe duets. Pan, when he hears about this, sends you a note via carrier pigeon that reads simply, "You've gone soft. Let's jam soon." Somewhere between organizing the flock into sleep cycles and teaching lambs to respond to tonal cues, it hits you. You've built a system, a structure, a gently humming, softly bleeding utopia, and that's exactly when things begin to unravel. It starts with the villagers. A woman named Thecla appears at the field's edge one morning, carrying a sickly goat in her arms. She looks pale, her shawl fluttering in the breeze, like a nervous flag. "They say you're blessed," she whispers. You blink. I have a very structured approach to animal care. She lowers the goat. "Please, just touch her." You look at the goat. She's old eyes, watery breath, raspy. You kneel, place a hand gently on her head, and murmur something comforting, half prayer, half poem. The goat exhales, then straightens up, then sneezes with theatrical flair, and begins chewing your sandal. Thecla gasps. "It's true," you try to explain. "It might just be clean water, and mineral-rich clover, and luck." But word spreads faster than a Dionysian after-party. By week's end, you've had 3 feverish children 2 coughing elders, and a very anxious man with a sore toe show up at your pasture, all hoping for a touch of whatever power you're hiding. You deflect. You recommend herbs. You invent something called pasture meditation and start leading group naps among the lambs. It works better than expected. Still, you know it's dangerous, because you've been here before. Centuries ago, when you helped build the temple at Delphi. When your whispers turned into oracles. When people stopped seeing you as a person and started seeing you as a shortcut to salvation. And this time, you're not even trying. You lie awake at night beneath the stars, wondering if you've broken the rules again. Too much healing, too much influence, too many wolves learning poetry. You start dreaming in golden flashes. A familiar voice deep amused ominous echoes from the back of your mind. Careful, Phoebus. Mortals break so easily. You wake up sweating a lamb curled against your ribs. The next morning Admetus pays you a visit. He's smiling as always, arms open wide as he approaches. Phoebus, you've caused quite a stir. The local healer says your touch is putting her out of business. You wince. Tell her I'm happy to consult. For a fair barter. Admetus laughs, then looks at you a little more closely. Be honest with me. Who are you, really? You hesitate, because here's the problem you like Admetus. Not just as a king or an employer, but as a person. He's kind. He listens. He has a baffling fondness for poorly executed frescoes, and once spent an entire evening explaining why goats are underappreciated philosophers. But if you tell him, you break the game. You remove the mask. You go from friend to deity. So you say I'm someone who needed a break from everything. He nods slowly. And you found it here. You look around at the peaceful hills, the sheep grazing in synchrony, the wolves writing haiku in the dust. Yeah, you say, for now. That evening you play your lyre with a softer hand. The notes stretch out slow and golden, each one hovering in the twilight, like a moth. A wolf howls once gently, and you wonder how much longer this quiet little world can last before Olympus comes calling. By now you've reached what mortals might call peak efficiency, and what gods might call micromanaging in a tunic. Your sheep rotate pastures like clockwork. The water troughs are crystal clear. The wolves inexplicably have adopted job titles. Lycos is head of security. Another, a light gray female you've started calling Eleni, is in charge of perimeter inspection, and on Thursdays morale. The goats, of course, remain anarchists, but you've taught them to respond to a high-pitched trill and bribe them with figs. With the day's chores neatly filed under complete, you turn your attention to one of your more ambitious projects, shepherd fashion. You begin with sandals. The standard issue is rough, ill-fitting, and practically designed to collect pebbles. You study them, frown, and then over the course of several evenings, redesign them using scraps of leather, braided reed, and divine geometry. The result, a durable, ergonomic sandal that molds to the foot and subtly flexes at the arch. You call it the Apollo sole. Diodoro says it looks too fancy, but borrows your prototype when he thinks you're not looking. Then come the cloaks. You experiment with different weights of wool, lining them with layers of woven moss and thin bark. The effect is surprisingly elegant. You even embroider a few with abstract constellations. One lamb chews a corner off the Virgo design. It's fine. Fashion is sacrifice, and naturally, you develop a color scheme. Earth tones, cool greens, warm rusts, the occasional splash of sky blue. Practical, but expressive. You present a few designs to the shepherds, who mostly blink at you, then return to discussing which goats are secretly plotting insurrection. But Admetus notices. He visits more often now, usually in the late afternoon, when the hills are quiet, and the light stretches like golden honey over the clover. He brings wine, dried olives, and once a small canvas on which he's attempted to paint a portrait of one of your sheep. It's abstract. I've been thinking about uniforms, he says one day, gesturing to your latest cloak, which billows in the breeze, like something a drama professor might wear to buy cheese. Oh, you ask, raising an eyebrow. For the palace staff, he continues, ignoring the skeptical look from a goat beside him. I like this color, sage. Is that sage? You nod. Sage with a hint of celestial moss. He grins. You really missed your calling as a tailor, or a tyrant. He chuckles. Same difference. You both sip your wine in companionable silence. A historical sidebar. While most ancient Greek shepherds wore simple tunics and cloaks, elite clothing occasionally filtered into rural life, especially when kings or nobles sought to elevate their image among the populace. Scholars still debate whether fashion among herders ever reached these levels of artistic indulgence, or whether this was a practice limited to festivals and ceremonial appearances. In your case, it's very much not ceremonial. You've got a sheep snoozing on your hemline. Back in the pasture, things run like a sleepily humming engine. You've even written lullabies to match the sheep's digestion cycles. At twilight, you play one called Fleece Sonata No. 2, and watch as your entire flock settles into neat rows, like cottony dominoes. It's deeply satisfying. And then there's the music. You can't help yourself. Each day you compose new pieces, soft, meandering melodies that drift over the fields like mist. The wolves hum along. The shepherds pretend not to listen. The sheep one begins to head bob in 3/4 time. You name her Euterpe. Your fame spreads again slowly, like jam on warm bread. More villagers wander up with odd requests. Could you bless this fig tree? Could you inspire my husband to be less dull? Could you teach my dog to play the flute? You politely decline the last one, though you do suggest teaching it to bark in C major. Still, you're careful now. You've learned that too much divine flair draws attention, so you keep your miracles small. A gentle touch, a whispered rhyme, a moment of peace in a quiet field. But one afternoon, while you're gently reorganizing the goats by temperament, a child approaches. She's maybe 7, barefoot, curly-haired, with a crown of daisies that would make any woodland sprite proud. She marches up to you, arms folded. Are you a god? You blink. Are you? She frowns. No, I'm Nikki. My mom says you're special. She says you're the reason our cow started giving milk again. You kneel, meeting her eyes. Maybe your cow just needed a nap. She considers this. Cows are tired a lot. Same. She leans in conspiratorially. If you are a god, I won't tell. But I want one wish. You raise an eyebrow. Only one. She nods solemnly. Make my brother hiccup forever. You chuckle. That's an oddly specific wish. He stole my plum. You ruffle her hair. I'll see what I can do. She runs off, and you return to your work with a half smile and a growing sense of inevitability. Because this gentle life, these soft jokes, these tiny miracles isn't sustainable. Not for someone like you. Not with Olympus still looming above, casting its long shadow like a sundial counting down. Still for now you herd, you hum, you hem sheep cloaks and invent goat colognes. You are Apollo god of shepherds and style, at least for the moment. You wake to find a wolf reciting your poetry, not out loud, Wolves, as far as you know, haven't cracked the mechanics of human language yet. But there it is. Lycos, sitting on a hillock with the sun cresting behind him, has scraped what appears to be a stanza into the dirt with his paw. Your handwriting, if it were done with claws and mild existential dread. You blink once, twice. I didn't teach you that one. Lycos just yawns. You glance around. The flock is quiet dew clinging to their wool in sleepy constellations. The breeze carries the faint scent of thyme and roasted onions from the village below. A perfectly peaceful morning, if not for the lupine literature. This is getting out of hand. It started innocently enough. A wolf perked up at a particularly melancholic chord. Another seemed soothed by the cadence of your voice during a particularly long tirade about goat flatulence. But now, they're composing, or at least curating. A shepherding side hustle has evolved into a poetry society. You briefly considered drafting a syllabus. Still, it's not just the wolves. One by one, the villagers are noticing. Take the carpenter, for instance. He stops by to deliver a new feeding trough. You thank him, offer him a fig, and he lingers. I heard you recite something the other night, he says, awkwardly rubbing the back of his neck. To the sheep. About stars. You nod. Could I get a copy? You hesitate. You want the sheep poem. He nods with genuine sincerity, a fringe historical tidbit. While most Greek poetry was passed down orally, pastoral poetry, a genre celebrating the simple rustic life, emerged in places like Sicily and Thebes, echoing themes not far off from what you're experiencing. Theocritus, centuries from now, will be considered a master of it. But you might be inventing it from the inside out. As the week continues, things spiral gently out of the realm of normal. Your lyre songs are being whistled by shepherd boys in town. A group of widows starts meeting in the late afternoons near your pasture to hear the sheep hum. One even claims her rheumatism fades when you recite odes in minor keys. You're not sure if that's placebo or miracle or both. Then there's Admetus. He's watching all of this with that same thoughtful gaze. Curious, fond, and maybe a little worried. People talk, he says one evening, sipping wine beside your fire. They always do you reply, feeding a lamb the last of your honeyed barley. They think you're more than a shepherd. You smile faintly. Because I moisturize. Because you made a goat stop biting its own leg, and then compose a lullaby for it. You pause. That's not unusual. It is exactly unusual. You turn the lyre in your hands. Do you want me to stop? He doesn't answer immediately. Then no. But I wonder how long we can pretend you're not whatever you are. You meet his gaze. As long as we like. Until Zeus gets bored of being top billing. Admetus laughs. Fair. But the cracks are forming. One evening, during a routine wolf chorus session, you swear it's spontaneous. A light appears in the field. Not fire, not torchlight. Something colder. Celestial. A shimmer just for a second, like a tear in the air. The wolves all look up at once. Even the sheep stop chewing. You feel it in your bones. Someone on Olympus has remembered you exist. You ignore it. You keep going. You sing a song about soft grass and softer regrets. The animals settle. But that night, you don't sleep well. You dream of the sun too bright, too close, bearing down on you with unblinking intensity. Of lyres snapping. Of golden chains, silk-wrapped but unyielding. You wake before dawn, heart-pounding dew on your forehead. You pull on your cloak and climb to the top of the nearest hill. Below you, Thessaly sleeps, fields stretching like a green sea. The wolves nap in a perfect triangle formation, snoring gently. The sheep are curled together, exhaling warm clouds into the pre-dawn chill. It's beautiful. It's temporary. You sit, watch, breathe. A few hours later, a shepherd boy finds you there and wordlessly hands you a folded piece of cloth. It's a sash, hand-dyed in your signature sage green embroidered with tiny sunbursts. From my mother, he says. She says your music helped her sleep. For the first time in years, you tie it around your waist, and despite the looming celestial notice, you smile, because the wolves may be quoting your poetry, and the villagers may be whispering prayers in your name. But for now, they're smiling too, and that's enough. Admetus, you realize, has been spending a suspicious amount of time in his workshop. You didn't know kings had workshops, but then Admetus isn't like other kings. He has a habit of showing up with clay smudges on his nose, or muttering about pigment ratios over dinner. He once built a lyre-shaped wine rack. It collapsed under the weight of a single amphora, but the gesture was endearing, so when he invites you to visit the palace courtyard one sunny afternoon, you go if only to make sure he hasn't tried sculpting a commemorative goat bust in your honor. The courtyard is transformed. Gone are the cracked marble benches and lopsided potted figs. In their place, a mosaic pathway of colored stones, a mini orchard of well-trimmed citrus trees, and in the center, a small shrine-like pavilion. It's tasteful, humble even, but unmistakably inspired. At the center of the pavilion is a simple pedestal. Upon it sits a stone sculpture of a lyre, your lyre beautifully carved, slightly exaggerated in size, and surrounded by offerings a bundle of wheat, a wreath of wool, a single carved wolf figurine. You blink, Admetus. He holds up a hand. Before you say anything, it's not a temple. Looks like a temple. It's a tribute to... He rubs the back of his neck. To peace, harmony, order. You arch an eyebrow. To me, then. He flushes. Maybe a little. You step forward, running your fingers over the stone lyre. It's warm from the sun. Impeccably detailed. Almost reverent. Why? Admetus shrugs, trying and failing to appear casual. Because things work now. The harvest is better. People sleep more. The goats stopped headbutting my advisor. I don't know what you are, but you've brought balance. You sit on the edge of the pavilion. You know I'm not staying right. He nods slowly. I know. But I also know I want to remember what it felt like to have things work. There's a pause. Then, I've been painting, he adds sheepishly. I've noticed the clay under your nails. It's not great, he warns. You chuckle. Nothing mortal ever is. That's why it's beautiful. He brings out a rolled canvas tied with twine. When he unfurls it, your breath catches not because it's technically brilliant, it's not, but because of the feeling it captures. You sitting in the pasture at sunset, surrounded by sheep and wolves with music drifting into a golden sky. It's gentle, kind, honest. You nod. Keep practicing. But maybe more trees next time. He laughs. A historical nugget. Some sources suggest that King Admetus was admired for his hospitality, especially in the ancient cult of Apollo. Whether these cults were formed organically or influenced by divine PR is up for debate. Historians still argue whether Apollo's mortal servitude was seen as punishment blessing or both. You're beginning to understand. It might have been a little of all three. You stay for dinner that night. The palace is quieter than you remember. No grand feasts, just a few close friends. A jug of fig wine and a stew that includes too much leek. But no one complains. Afterward, you and Admetus return to the courtyard and sit beneath the citrus trees. I envy you, he says quietly. You're a king. He shakes his head. You can leave. You can choose to disappear. You could too. Not really. My people need me. They need someone to hold things together. You hold things together just by showing up. You frown. It doesn't feel that way. He smiles. That's how you know you're doing it right. You don't say anything after that. The breeze rustles the trees. Somewhere nearby, a wolf huffs in its sleep. A sheep bleats softly in its dreams. You stare up at the stars, trying not to map them into constellations. Trying not to remember who you are, what waits for you above. But then the wind shifts, and for just a moment you do remember the feeling of weightlessness, of burning brilliance, of divine song, threading through the void. You exhale. You're not ready. But time like sheep is difficult to herd. The next morning, things are oddly still. The villagers give you more space. Myron mumbles less. Diodoros bows slightly when handing you your usual fig-stuffed bread. Even the wolves keep their distance. Something is coming. You feel it in your bones, in the way the sun rises half a breath early, and the wind hums in a key you don't recognize. You walk the pasture anyway. You brush a lamb's ear and adjust a fence and whisper something soothing to a goat with separation anxiety. You play your lyre softly, a minor key today. No poetry, just the notes, because some days aren't for glory, they're for grace. If there's one thing that never quite stops surprising you, it's how mortals handle love. It's dramatic. It's reckless. It usually involves poor decisions and excellent food. And in Admetus's case, it involves a boar 3 lyre serenades, and a woman named Alcestis, who could outlogic a philosopher and outstare a lion. You meet her on a particularly breezy afternoon. The sheep are arranged in tidy clusters, thanks in part to Eleni, your ever-vigilant wolf lieutenant, and the grass is the kind of green that makes painters weep. Admetus approaches flushed and breathless. Phoebus, he says, I need advice. You eye him. Is this about the goats again? No, it's about a girl. Ah, you lean back against a sun-warmed rock. Go on. Her name's Alcestis. She's the daughter of Peleus, king of Iolcus Peleus. Admetus nods. She's brilliant, strong, a terrifyingly efficient javelin thrower. Sounds perfect. She's also, how do I put this, impossibly selective. She says she'll only marry a man who can yoke a lion and a boar to the same chariot. You blink. That's specific. She says it's symbolic. You resist the urge to roll your eyes. You know that's a trap, right? Isn't all love a trap? You stare at him. No, that's fishing. Still there's something earnest in his eyes, and a touch of panic. You sigh. Fine, I'll help. But only because I'm a sucker for romance and animal-related challenges. Over the next few days, you help Admetus build a chariot strong enough to survive 2 extremely incompatible animals. The boar, large and irritable, tries to eat everything. The lion, regal and judgmental, mostly lounges and glares. Eventually, you resort to composing lullabies specifically tailored to each beast's temperament. The boar responds best to a brisk 7 and 8 rhythm, and lots of drum-like plucks. The lion prefers slow ballads in minor keys and scratches behind the ears. Admetus, for his part, practices posture and tries not to scream. When the big day comes, he rides into Iolcus like a man possessed, or at least mildly concussed. The lion yowls. The boar snorts. Alcestis watches from a balcony, arms folded, expression unreadable. Then miraculously she smiles. The crowd erupts. You, watching from a distance, raise a brow and mutter, that actually worked. Now here's the thing. Mortals tend to believe their love stories are unique, and in some ways they are. But there's a pattern to them, a rhythm, a foolish risk, a proving of worth, a moment of recognition, and if they're lucky, a shared laugh at how ridiculous it all was. Admetus and Alcestis fall into that rhythm faster than you expect. She visits the palace a few days later and nearly knocks over a table correcting a scribe's spelling. You like her immediately. She asks you bluntly, "Are you the reason my cousin's goat started reciting sheep facts?" You smile. "Possibly." She nods. "I respect that." You start spending evenings together, the three of you, Admetus, Alcestis, and you talking over wine and poorly roasted chestnuts. She's sharp funny and doesn't worship the ground Admetus walks on. She teases him, challenges him, and when he sulks, she laughs and dares him to do better. You approve, but with love as always comes cost. One evening, Admetus pulls you aside. She said yes. You raise your glass to absurd animal bonding challenges. He grins, then sobers. But there's a catch. There always is. She told me she'd only marry me if I could secure her a blessing from the gods. A sign that this union has divine approval. You narrow your eyes. She knows, doesn't she? He doesn't answer. You rub your temples. She's too smart for her own good. She said she won't tell anyone. But she also said, "If you helped me with the beasts, you can help with this." You glance up at the stars. This isn't a game anymore, Admetus. I know. You hesitate. Because this mortal entanglement pulls at things you've tried to bury. Longings, regrets, that ache to be seen and not just worshipped. But you also see the way he looks at her, so you agree. The next morning you gather wild herbs and carve a small sun symbol into a clay disc. You whisper an old hymn into it, a minor invocation, not powerful, not binding, but warm. A flicker of light, a hush of approval. When Alcestis receives it, she holds it to her chest and says nothing, but you see the smile that creeps in before she turns away. Fun fact and myth: Apollo does indeed assist Admetus with his marriage to Alcestis. Some stories suggest he manipulated the fates to allow Admetus a longer life, a move that will become far more important later. Historians still debate whether this episode was a metaphor for divine intervention in mortal love, or just Apollo's way of meddling with death's schedule. You'd argue both, for now Admetus is happy. Alcestis is radiant. The palace hums with preparation. And you sit in the fields playing a soft song for a lamb that's just discovered its own echo. A wolf howls along. A goat sneezes in rhythm. And for one fleeting moment, everything feels still. You're not supposed to meddle with death. That's a rule. It's not written down anywhere, of course. Gods hate paperwork. But it's implied in the way the fates squint at you during council meetings, in the way Thanatos always seems to be 2 steps behind and frowning. Death is sacred, fixed. Tampering with it is like trying to rearrange a sand mandala during a windstorm, disrespectful, messy, and usually followed by someone yelling. And yet here you are. It starts small. A whisper, a cough, a pale hand against a sun-warmed wall. Alcestis, vibrant and unshakable, begins to fade. No one knows why. The healers call it a humoral imbalance. The priests say it's a curse. The old women whisper that too much happiness always draws the gods' attention, which is ironic, given that you are the god in question, and you're not feeling particularly attentive right now. You sit with Admetus as he stares into the hearth eyes hollow. She says it's her time. You shake your head. That's not how time works. She says she's glad she loved so deeply. You clench your jaw. She's not supposed to talk like that. She says she wants to choose how she goes, and that is when something shifts in you, because gods live forever. You've seen love, sure, but not this kind. Not the kind that accepts endings, that stares them down unafraid, that dares to turn death into a final act of giving. She's willing to die for me, Admetus whispers, and you're willing to let her. You snap. He doesn't reply, so you do what you always do when you're scared. You meddle. You leave that night. No lyre, no cloak. Just you, and the sound of dry leaves crackling underfoot. The sky is moonless, the stars winking like they know you're up to no good. Again, you find Thanatos where he always is, somewhere quiet, somewhere ignored. In this case, the edge of a forest, where the mist hugs the ground, and even the wolves won't follow. Phoebus, he says without turning. I was wondering when you'd show up. You approach slowly. It's Apollo, actually. Lord Apollo, if you want to get ceremonial. You're not Lord of Death, he says simply. I'm here to make a deal. No, I haven't offered it yet. Still no. You sigh. Look. Just a pause, a delay, a brief intermission. Let her live. Thanatos finally turns. His eyes are dark, deep, bottomless. Everyone thinks they're the exception. She's not asking to live forever. He folds his arms. Then what? You hesitate. Let someone else take her place. Thanatos tilts his head. A trade. You nod. Does he know? You don't answer. Thanatos shrugs. Fine. I'll make the offer. If someone volunteers to die in her place truly willingly, then she may live. If not. He smiles, and it is not kind. Well, you know how this ends. You return to the palace at dawn. Admetus is in the courtyard pacing. You tell him everything. He listens silent, and when you're done, he says, I'll ask. No one steps forward. Not his guards, not his advisors, not his people, not even his aging cousin, who once told Alcestis she made too much eye contact to be marriageable. But Alcestis, she does. She steps up, chin high, voice calm. Then I'll take my own place. And Thanatos, because he is nothing if not punctual, arrives. You watch as the color drains from her, as her breath slows, as the air goes still. The palace holds its breath. A dove falls silent mid-coo, and then something inside you breaks. You grab your lyre. You stand between Thanatos and the woman who once told you that goat ears make excellent bookmarks. And you play, not a battle song, not a summoning hymn, something older, deeper, the music of grief woven into hope, the sound of wheat fields and wind of laughter shared at dusk of a life that wanted more time and asked for it with grace. Thanatos hesitates. You're not supposed to interfere, he says, voice rough. You don't stop playing. The sheep gather. The wolves sit. The sky brightens. And then he leaves. No words, no drama, just a whisper of shadow fading into the light. Alcestis breathes. Admetus weeps. You fall to your knees exhausted. Historians, of course, argue whether this myth represents a moral lesson on hospitality, as Admetus had once hosted Apollo, or whether it was simply a poetic nod to love conquering even death. Others say it was just Apollo being Apollo, dramatic, well-intentioned, and allergic to rules. But you know what it was. It was love, not your own, but theirs. You meddled, you intervened, and this time no one stopped you. You expect a thank you from the fates. You don't get one. In fact, what you get is a thunderstorm one that rolls in faster than natural, darker than it should be, and oddly concentrated right over Admetus's palace. You're standing in the courtyard barefoot in wet marble, as the rain begins not a gentle drizzle, but full volume Olympus rage. Lightning forks through the sky like angry handwriting. Thunder grumbles with unmistakable sarcasm. Somewhere overhead, Zeus is doing his best dramatic pause. You don't flinch. You never flinch. But you do sigh. Admetus pokes his head out from a colonnade hair, plastered to his forehead. Are we being smitten? It's a passive-aggressive reminder. You shout over the wind. Reminder of what? That I'm not supposed to save people. He blinks. You're not. No. Lightning cracks again, this time closer. A fig tree explodes. A goat faints. Alcestis, ever composed, walks calmly into the courtyard with an olive wood bowl and starts collecting rainwater. Like this is just another Tuesday. You look up at the sky and raise your arms. I didn't break the rules. I bent them gently. A bolt of lightning answers by vaporizing your favorite lyre tree. You frown. Okay, that was unnecessary. Let's talk for a moment about divine boundaries. Most gods treat them like lines in sand, easy to ignore, fun to kick. You historically have played hopscotch with them. But the Fates, the Moirai, they do not enjoy being outmaneuvered. Clotho spins the thread, Lachesis measures it, and Atropos cuts it. You didn't exactly snip the thread early. You just tied it in a loop, a decorative one, for storytelling purposes. Still, they noticed, and when the Fates notice, things get weird. Take today, for example. After the storm passes, oddities start trickling in like uninvited party guests. Bread refuses to rise. Wells burble with fizzy water. A rooster begins quoting snippets of your sheep poetry correctly. You make a note to apologize to Hermes, who probably delivered that particular memo under duress. Myron blames the weather. Diodoros blames the wolves. You know better. The Fates are annoyed. Not furious yet, but peeved. It's worse. They do petty like no one else. You start getting celestial side-eyes from everyone. Ravens perch on your windowsill. And don't blink. A goat bleats in iambic pentameter. The wolves form a circle and stare at the moon for a full hour. And then comes the letter. It arrives via cloud. Literally, a small, puffy cumulus descends into the pasture parks itself, next to a suspiciously musical lamb, and ejects a scroll tied with black thread. You untie it reluctantly. It reads, Dear Phoebus, we see you. Cease interference. Kindly rejoin your post. Love the department of inevitable conclusions. You look up at the cloud. Is this a warning? It floats away. You know what comes next. Admetus calls a council to discuss the strange happenings. He tries to keep it subtle, but words like curses, omens, and that shiny man with the harp keep popping up. You attend quietly, sitting in the back, and doodling lyre schematics on your clay tablet. Alcestis catches your eye. She doesn't say anything, just tilts her head slightly. You know what she's thinking. It's time. You stand up slowly. I'm leaving, you announce. Silence. Then what Admetus rises incredulous. Why? You gesture around. Because I bent the rules. Because the balance has shifted. Because fig trees are exploding. But you saved her. You nod. And in doing so, I nudged the scale. Alcestis steps forward. We don't want a temple. We just wanted time. I know you say gently, but I can't stay. Not without more consequences. You look at Admetus, your friend, your student, your mirror. You have what you need. You've learned how to lead, how to love, how to paint, sort of. He tries to laugh. It catches. You place a hand on his shoulder. This was never forever. Historians still argue whether Apollo's departure from Admetus's court was voluntary and forced, or symbolic. Some say it marked the transition of Admetus from a mortal man into a mythic figure. Others say it was just the gods cleaning up a narrative loose end. You, of course, know the truth. You say goodbye that night not with fanfare but with a song. You play your lyre one last time in the pasture. The sheep gather. The wolves form a half circle. The villagers stand at the edge hushed, and as your fingers move over the strings, the stars above you blink once, acknowledgement, approval, a very subtle nice try, and maybe a touch of forgiveness. It doesn't take long for the official summons to arrive. A dove, of course. Always a dove. Zeus insists on thematic consistency, and the fates have an excellent sense of theater. This one lands neatly on your shoulder, while you're brushing out a particularly stubborn patch of burrs from Muse the lamb's fleece. You sigh before you even untie the scroll. Apollo. Your leave is concluded. Kindly report to your solar duties immediately. We are out of alignment and out of patience. Do not make us send Hermes. Zeus. You pat the dove who coos apologetically. It's not his fault, so this is it. No fireworks, no heralds. Just a curt note and a celestial deadline. The shepherds are the first to notice the change. You move slower that morning, less involved. You let Myron handle the goat count. He messes it up, of course, but you don't correct him. Diodoros asks why you're humming in a major key. Just tying up chords, you say. They don't press. The wolves know before you say anything. They gather at dusk in a loose half-circle, heads, low tails still. Lycos sits closest, fur silvered in moonlight. You kneel, scratching behind his ears. You'll keep them safe, right? He huffs. I mean the sheep. And the villagers. Maybe Admetus. Maybe. A longer huff. You smile. Good boy. Muse, the lamb, follows you around all day, bleating softly like she knows something is changing, but hasn't decided whether to protest yet. You feed her a fig, and try not to feel guilty. That evening you go to the palace. Admetus greets you with his usual grin. Tired, slightly crooked, completely sincere. So what happens now? I go back. He nods slowly. To the sky, to the chariot, the light, the constant blinding brilliance, and everyone asking for omens about their turnips. He laughs. I'll miss you. You clap a hand on his shoulder. You've got this. You've always had it. And you pause. I'll manage. Alcestis joins you on the steps. She's wearing a soft blue tunic, embroidered with sheep-ear design. It suits her. You left more than footprints here, she says. I left a wolf poetry club. Exactly. You all sit for a while, drinking wine, watching the stars drift into their familiar patterns. You trace them with your finger, quietly adjusting a few out of habit. No one notices, but it helps. Before dawn, you take one last walk through the pasture. It's quiet, peaceful, a little muddy, perfect. You whisper goodbyes to the sheep, ruffle a few woolly heads, and play a soft farewell tune on your lyre. Just one, just enough to leave a lingering echo in the grass. And then, it's time. You walk to the highest hill, the sky already paling at the edges. The chariot waits golden and glowing with its flaming horses pawing the horizon, like they've been idle for too long. Probably bored Hermes with bad jokes. You take a breath, climb in. The reins hum in your hands. Familiar, heavy, with a final glance back at Thessaly, at the soft fields, the temple that's not a temple, the pastel rooftops you rise. Higher, brighter, the sun crests behind you, pulled along by your hand, and the world wakes up. Somewhere below a wolf howls not in mourning but in tribute, and far off a sheep bleats to the rhythm of your song. Historians say Apollo left because his penance was over, that Zeus summoned him, that the sky needed him, but the people of Thessaly remember it differently. They say the sun grew gentler that year, the crops thrived, the goats stopped biting, and somewhere high above a shepherd god smiled. The sun keeps rising. That's your job again. Every morning, like clockwork, or more accurately, like cosmic obligation, you grip the golden reins and guide the flaming horses across the sky. They snort fire. One occasionally tries to bite a cloud. Another hums in what you suspect is E-flat. Mortals see the light and whisper prayers, write poems, sacrifice olives. You meanwhile are counting the hours until sunset. It's not that you hate it, this celestial responsibility. There's a rhythm to it, a grandeur. Every arc across the sky paints the world in gold and fire. You make shadows dance. You warm wheat fields. You illuminate lovers' secrets and philosophers' squints. But it's impersonal, efficient, and deeply, achingly loud. Olympus welcomes you back, with the usual fanfare nymphs, with fruit satyrs, with instruments. Hermes juggling lightning bolts, like he's auditioning for a festival no one asked for. You accept the congratulations, with a tight smile, nod graciously at Zeus's non-committal grunt, and dodge Dionysus's invitation to a post-return symposium with aggressive interpretive wine tasting. The muses offer you new song cycles. You thank them, though none feel quite right. They're all too grand, too sweeping. You miss melodies hummed while braiding wool. Artemis finds you after your third sunrise. You're lounging on a sunbeam staring at nothing. You're bored, she says. I'm glowing and bored. Classic you. You glance sideways. Anything happening on Earth? She snorts. Don't start. But she sits beside you, letting the silence stretch. You know she understands. Of all the Olympians, she's the only one who ever enjoyed being away. Not for power, but for peace. How's Thessaly, you ask casually. They named a goat after you. It bites people. You smile. And the villagers, still herding, still whispering, still suspicious of poetic wolves. You let the image linger. Back in Thessaly, you know they've returned to their routines. The fields are likely overgrown in that one corner you never fully cleared. Admetus probably has a new staff member, wearing overly stylish cloaks, and pretending they thought of it first. Alcestis is likely teaching Muse how to not eat sandals. You wonder if Lycos still watches the stars. You still dream of the pasture, not the grand moments, the storm, or the shrine, or the quiet miracle, but the small ones. A sheep, blinking slowly in the sun. A child offering you a flower crown. The way the wolves circled up at dusk, like they'd never do anything else. Here on Olympus, everything is gilded and glowing. There's no mud, no burrs, no stubborn goats with leadership aspirations. And maybe that's the problem. One afternoon, you descend partway just enough to see the curve of the hills, the shimmer of distant rooftops. You don't land. You don't announce yourself. Just a glimpse. Below the sheep graze. The fields rustle. Someone plays a flute with more enthusiasm than skill. It's enough. You return to the sky before anyone notices. Because you're not supposed to interfere anymore. You're not supposed to bend rules, extend lives, or conduct musical choirs with livestock. You're just supposed to shine. And you do. But every so often, when no one's looking, you tilt the sunbeam just so that it lands softly in a particular pasture in Thessaly, so that a lamb's wool glows just a little brighter, so that someone feels warm for no reason at all and thinks I'm okay today. Historians may never know this part. They'll write of your return as triumphant. They'll paint you golden and stoic. They'll speak of justice and balance of a god who served his time and ascended once more. But in one quiet valley, where wolves still hum lullabies and sheep line up for grooming in spiral patterns, the people remember differently. They say the sun feels like it's watching them now, like it remembers, and maybe, just maybe, like it misses them too. You'd think after all this the gods might finally leave you alone. But no, one morning, shortly after your return becomes yesterday's news, you find yourself summoned again. Not by Zeus this time. Thankfully, he's busy arm wrestling fate or whatever it is he does when he's bored. But by the fates themselves. You arrive at their chamber, the one outside of space, beyond the edges of Olympus, where time folds like a badly creased toga. The place smells faintly of ink and inevitability. Clotho looks up from her spinning. He arrives. Lachesis is measuring what appears to be a shoelace. You hope it's not yours. Atropos is sharpening her scissors. You try to be casual. To what do I owe the honor? You interfered, Atropos says, as if that weren't glaringly obvious. I intervene gently. You paused a thread, Clotho corrects. Lachesis chimes in. A bold move. Unusual. Effective. Atropos glares at her. Irregular. You raise your hands. Look, if we're handing out citations, I'd like to point out that Thanatos agreed to the deal. No strings cut. No divine paperwork was shredded in the making of this miracle. True, Clotho allows. There's a pause. You fidget. Finally, Lachesis sighs. It is complicated. Atropos thinks you should be punished again, Clotho says. Shocking, you mutter. She has agreed to a different form of consequence, Lachesis continues. Atropos speaks at last. You may keep your chariot, your title, your duties, but you brace. You will remember. You blink. I already do. No, she says. This time you will keep remembering. They wave you away before you can respond. You return to the sky. Resume the sunrise. But something feels different now, like a pebble in your divine sandal. Memory, mortal memory. Every time you pass over Thessaly, you see them. Not just the rooftops and fields, but moments. A lamb's first bleat. Edmetus sneaking figs into your cloak. Alcestis holding a bowl of rainwater. The way the wolves tilted their heads during the coda of your dusk melody. You feel it, not just as a god, but as someone who was there. You start writing again. Not hymns, not prophecies, stories. Small ones. About goats who demand democracy. About shepherds who whistle in polyphony. About a boy who tried to impress a girl with a lion and a boar. You keep them in a hidden corner of your temple tucked behind the altar. You never show them to the priests. And slowly, gently, you become quieter, more present, still divine, yes, but less concerned with the shine. Because once you were a shepherd, once you were humbled, once you were loved not for your fire, but for your warmth. And the thing about warmth is mortals remember it. They tell stories. They pass them down. They say that in a long ago time, the god of the sun walked the earth, sang to the sheep, and taught the wolves to hum. They say he got fired. They say he glowed even when covered in mud, and if you listen closely on certain breezy evenings, you can still hear the faintest strains of his lyre, drifting like a lullaby across the clover. A last lullaby, just enough to fall asleep to. And now, as the last echoes of that ancient field fade from your thoughts, breathe. Let go of the golden reins. Set down the lyre. There's no need to guide the sun tonight. No need to shepherd the flock or rearrange the goats by temperament. The pasture is quiet. The wolves are curled up soft and dreaming. Even Muse the lamb is finally asleep, hooves twitching in a dream of fig trees and lullabies. The stars are still, the sky is wide, and you, whether mortal or something more, are safe within it. Let your breath soften. Let your thoughts slow. Nothing is expected of you here. There's no thunder, no judgment, only the warmth of remembered grass beneath your feet, and the low, familiar hum of the earth, turning gently under the sun's golden memory. The world can wait. For now, you rest. Drift back into that sleepy Thessalian field, where sheep graze in orderly spirals, and wolves write poetry in the dirt. Where gods learn silence. Where peace isn't a prize, but a rhythm slow and gentle and yours to keep. The lyre plays on in your heart soft strings, plucked by memory, not demand. Let yourself follow its melody. Let your mind loosen like twilight over hills. Let your story fade, not into ending, but into stillness. Sleep now. The sun will rise again, but not yet, not just yet.